All right, so again, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Cerise Carrington. I serve as the Assistant Director of Financial Aid here in the MSW program, and I am joined here by my colleague, Marissa Tucker. She will introduce herself in just a moment here. But today's presentation is around student loan repayment and forgiveness. Just a couple of objectives for the presentation. Hopefully students will be able to understand federal student loan types, understand student loan consolidation a little bit, discussing loan repayment options, as well as understanding loan forgiveness options available for us as social workers. I want to give a brief caveat. Many of you all may be aware of HR 1, the most recent legislation that has passed in Congress a few weeks ago. That does have some significant impacts on federal student loan borrowing as well as student loan repayment options, which then ultimately could impact down the line student loan forgiveness programs. We're going to try to the best of our ability in today's presentation to provide some information where available. So there's still a lot of interpretation that needs to be determined from this recent legislation. So we do not have all the answers, unfortunately, in terms of what's to come in the specific nuances, especially as it relates to some of these loan repayment options, as well as how that will then impact students' eligibility for various loan forgiveness programs. But we'll try our best with the information that we do have available currently. We'll try our best to provide that throughout the context of this webinar today. So at this time, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Marissa.
Well, thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us as well. As Cerise mentioned, my name is Marissa. I'm a financial aid officer, and I'm happy to be discussing kind of the different student loan programs and different repayment plans that are currently offered to students as they graduate. So to start off, just looking at the different loan types, students in our program are eligible, and students in our program who submit a FAFSA application are eligible for that direct unsubsidized loan. It is awarded to both undergraduate and graduate students. It is not based on need and is awarded to each student who submits a FAFSA application. Borrowers are responsible for the interest that accrues from the time the funds are dispersed onto their accounts. Graduate students are also eligible for that direct Graduate Plus loan. It is not based on need. However, students must submit a separate application as it is based on credit, and not every student is approved for that Graduate Plus loan. Again, just like that unsubsidized loan, the borrower is responsible for the interest that accrues from the times the funds are dispersed onto the student's accounts. For both of these loans, the interest rates are fixed for the lifetime of that loan. Interest does accrue daily for both of these loans, and it does begin once the loan has paid out onto the students' accounts. If students are able to, they may begin to make payments while enrolled in school. They do not have to wait until they graduate. So some things to prepare for kind of loan repayment in that process. So as we know, students who borrow federal loans and are graduating, they must complete exit counseling. Exit counseling helps borrowers understand their rights, responsibilities in repayment, and options for a repayment plan. This can be completed through studentaid.gov. I do want to just point out that this is just a snapshot of your information at the time you complete it. Obviously, repayment won't begin until 6 months after you graduate, so things are most likely going to change after you complete it and before repayment will begin, and that's absolutely okay. You will not be held accountable for what you record in your exit counseling. Students can also view their financial aid through their dashboard on studentaid.gov. This shows students the sum of every federal loan they received, whether it be as an undergraduate student or as a graduate student. You can look into each loan individually on your dashboard, and it will show you the interest rate of each loan, the lender and the servicer contact information, and the status of each loan. The lender is the financial institution that makes the loan and disperses it. For federal loans, the lender is the Department of Education, and then the servicer is the company that will collect on that payment. Repayment of your federal loans begins after the 6-month grace period from the month you graduate. Students, again, as I mentioned, are able to make payments during their grace period. So when you do sign into studentaid.gov, this is just a snapshot of what your dashboard will look like. Again, you are able to view your federal aid grant and loan history. And again, this is studentaid.gov. As I mentioned, students can view specific information regarding their loans by clicking on View Details and then clicking on the loan types. Again, from here, students can see their loan servicer, the interest, the status of their loan. The loan status indicates where your loan is in the process. So some statuses may be you're currently enrolled in school, that maybe you have a grace period, that you're in repayment, forbearance, default, etc. Being 9 months past due on your student loan does mean your loans will be in default, and the consequences of being default on your student loans do include damage to your credit rating and future borrowing ability. So now to talk about consolidation. Students who have more than one federal student loan may want to consider combining the loans into one direct consolidation loan. Consolidating different types of loans into one loan with one interest rate and one monthly repayment can help borrowers better manage their loan repayment. Students can consolidate their loans during a grace period once repayment has begun or during a period of deferment or forbearance. It is important to note that if you consolidate your loans during your grace period, you give up the remainder of your grace period and you will begin repayment after your direct consolidated loan has processed. You can have the processing of your consolidation loan delayed until closer to the end of your grace period to avoid this. Consolidating loans can increase your repayment period with certain repayment plans, but monthly payments may go down. If you are interested in consolidation, students can apply online through studentaid.gov. There is no application fee to consolidate your federal education loans into a direct consolidation loan. Unless the loan you want to consolidate is in deferment, forbearance, or grace period, it's important for you to continue to make payments on these loans until your consolidation servicer tells you that they have been paid off with your new direct consolidation loan. When you apply for a direct consolidation loan, you also don't have to consolidate all of your eligible loans. So now speaking a little bit about deferment and forbearance. Deferment and forbearance is usually best for short-term situations, as typically you're not making any progress towards forgiveness or paying back your loan. Deferment is the temporary suspension of loan payments. Interest on your unsubsidized loan accrues, but for subsidized loans, interest does not accrue. Subsidized loan is a loan that you may have had as an undergraduate student. It's only given to undergraduate students who show need. If you're responsible for paying the interest on your loans during a deferment, you can either pay the interest as it accrues or allow it to accrue and be capitalized. It will then be added to your loan principal balance at the end of your deferment period. This does mean that the total amount you repay over the lifetime of your loan may be higher. Qualifying situations for deferment include enrolling in school at least half-time or more, military service, unemployment, or experiencing economic hardship. You must continue making payments on your student loans until you have been notified that your request for deferment has been granted. If you do stop paying and your deferment is not approved, your loans will become delinquent and you may go into default. You can find these forms available on studentaid.gov or with your loan servicer. I do want to mention with the new bill that has passed HR 1, beginning July 1st, 2027, the economic hardship and unemployment deferments will be eliminated. Forbearance is a temporary reduction or postponement of payments. Interest, again, on all loans will accrue. Again, you won't be making any progress towards forgiveness or paying back your loan. Forbearance can be granted for up to 12 months at a time for no more than 3 years. You do have a limited amount of forbearance available, so it is important to save it for when you do need it. Again, to apply for forbearance, you must fill out the form on studentaid.gov or again from your loan servicer. Qualifying situations do include financial difficulties, medical expenses, or change in employment. Again, you must continue making payments on your student loan until you've been notified that your request for forbearance has been granted. If you do stop paying and your forbearance is not approved, your loan will become delinquent and you may go into default. Again, some more updates from the recent bill that has passed. Again, beginning July 1st, 2027, forbearance will be reduced from 12 months at a time for a maximum of 3 years to 9 months at a time during any 24-month period. Again, it is at the discretion of the servicer to grant deferment or forbearance. If you are interested in either deferment or forbearance, again, you will need to request it through your loan servicer. And again, they do have that form to fill out. So now we'll go into some of the repayment plan options. I do just want to mention before we go over these plans, as Therese has mentioned with the new bill that has passed, I'm going to be presenting the most current information that we have as far as we know. Right now, current borrowers with no new loans can continue to utilize these existing repayment plan options, but income-based repayment is going to be income-based repayment plans are going to be simplified starting in 2028. And so that's when students will need to switch to the new income-driven rebased payment plan that they will be providing more information on, obviously, as it comes up. So now just to get started, this is the standard repayment plan. The standard repayment plan, sorry, let me back up a little bit. I do just want to mention you can change your repayment plan at any time for free. Not all repayment plans are available for all loan types, but in general, there are two kinds of repayment plans. Repayment plans that are not dependent on income. These are what we refer to as fixed repayment plans. And then repayment plans that do depend on income. These are what we refer to as those income-driven repayment plans. And the income-driven repayment plans are the ones that are going to be impacted with this new bill. So now that that's over, let me get back into that standard repayment plan. It is eligible for any direct loan borrower. Students are going to be automatically enrolled in this payment plan if there is no other repayment plan that is selected. For this repayment plan, payments are a fixed amount that ensures your loan will be paid off within 10 years. This is the shortest repayment period, which means you will have the highest monthly payment, but less interest will accrue over the lifetime of the loan. The exact payment amount is calculated so that you pay off the entire loan. That would include the interest that does accrue before the end of your repayment period. With the new bill, it will modify the standard repayment plan to allow borrowers to pay a fixed amount from 10 to 25 years, depending on their student loan balance. But again, more information on that will come. The graduated repayment plan is for students who currently have a low income, but expect for it to increase steadily over time. Any direct loan borrower is eligible for this plan. Under this plan, your monthly payment starts out low and then increases every 2 years. Again, this is a 10-year repayment schedule. The monthly loan payment includes the interest that does accrue between payments made each month, so no additional unpaid interest will accrue while you're making payments with this plan. The extended repayment plan allows students to repay their loans over an extended period of time. Payments are made for up to 25 years instead of limiting students to the 10-year repayment plan. Borrowers with more than $30,000 in outstanding loans are eligible for the extended repayment plan. Under this plan, your monthly payments are a fixed or graduated amount and can be made for up to 25 years. The monthly loan payment includes the interest that accrues between payments made each month. So again, no additional unpaid interest will accrue while you're making payments with this plan. So now we're going to get into those income-driven repayment plans. Again, an income-driven repayment plan bases your monthly student loan payment amount on your income and your family size. So for some people, payments on an income-driven repayment plan can be as low as $0 per month. There are 3 current income-driven repayment plans: the pay as you earn or pay repayment plan, income-based repayment plan or IBR, and the income contingent repayment plan or ICR. All of them do require an application in which you must verify your income and your household size. This application is available on studentaid.gov. Students interested in these plans must recertify their income with their servicer annually. You can sign up to do this automatically. You can also automatically re-enroll in their income-driven repayment plans if you agree to secure disclosure of your tax information. Under all income-driven repayment plans, any remaining loan balance may be forgiven if your federal student loans aren't fully repaid at the end of your repayment period. So that would be either 20 or 25 years. The length of your repayment period does depend on which plan you are on. Income-driven repayment plans do usually lower your federal student loan payments. However, this comes with the consequence of paying more interest over time. Per IRS rules, you might be required to pay income tax on any amount that is forgiven. So now we'll go a little bit deeper into each one of these. So the pay-as-you-earn repayment plan, or PAY, is based upon income and family size. It is based on 10% of your discretionary income, and students are placed on a 20-year repayment plan. If you are married, your spouse's income or loan debt will be considered only if you're filing a joint tax return. Eligible students must have a high debt relative to their income. Even if your income increases over time, the monthly repayment will never be more than what you would pay under a standard repayment plan. This is going to be impacted by the new bill that has been passed. So if you are interested in the pay-as-you-earn repayment plan, you must apply and be enrolled in the plan before July 1st, 2027. No new enrollments will be accepted on or after July 1st, 2027. The income-based repayment plan is based upon income and family size. Your monthly payments will either be 10% or 15% of your discretionary income, and your repayment plan will be 20 or 25 years, depending upon when you borrowed the loan. Again, if you are married, your spouse's income or loan debt will be considered only if you file a joint tax return. Eligible students must have a high debt relative to their income. And again, your payment will never be more than that standard repayment plan amounts. The income contingent repayment plan, or ICR, is again based upon income, family size, and the amount of your the total of your direct loans. The monthly payment will be the lesser of 20% of your discretionary income, or what you would pay on a repayment plan with a fixed payment over the course of 12 years, adjusted to account for your income. This is a 25-year repayment plan. If you are married, your spouse's income or loan debt will be considered only if you file that joint tax return, or if you choose to repay your direct loans jointly with your spouse. Again, any direct loan borrower is eligible for this repayment plan. Again, as I've mentioned, the income-based repayment assistance plans the new income-based repayment assistance plan will begin in July of 2026. This new income-based repayment plan will require borrowers to make minimum monthly payments of at least $10 for 30 years and will allow for some assistance from the Secretary of Education to reduce loan balances by no more than $50 a month in certain circumstances. The base pay of the monthly payment amounts that are due is set to a sliding scale from $120 or 10% of the borrower's adjusted gross income. Again, I do just want to point out that the best place to ask questions about specific loan repayment plans is your loan servicer. I will now turn it over to Cerise, who will go into more detail about the different loan forgiveness programs that may be available to our students.
Thanks, Marissa. All right, so the primary one that many social workers tend to be eligible for is the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, otherwise known as PSLF. Just as a quick note, as we continue to reference HR 1 in this presentation, there is no indication with HR 1 that PSLF will be going away. It is our understanding that PSLF will remain. However, as I'm talking, naturally, as Marissa mentioned, some of the loan repayment options that you have will be changing. And then I'll touch upon a small piece when I talk about the qualified employer piece. So PSLF, the program forgives the remaining balance of direct loans after you have made 120 qualifying monthly payments, which is equivalent to 10 years, under a qualifying repayment plan while working full-time for a qualified employer. So I feel like that was a mouthful that I just shared. So I'll kind of break it down a little bit into each one of these components. So we've already talked about what a direct loan is. And so generally we're speaking about, particularly for our students, either the direct unsubsidized loan, the direct graduate plus loan, the direct subsidized loan, which some of you may have borrowed in undergrad, as well could potentially count towards this. But what is considered a qualified employer? As of right now, it is about the employer and not your specific job duties or responsibilities. And so I'll use myself as an example. So it's not that I work, as an assistant director of financial aid, but it's because I work for the University of Michigan, for instance, that would qualify me under the employer piece of this. So a qualified employer is a government organization, whether it be federal, state, local, or tribal. Most of the organizations will need to have a tax-exempt nonprofit organization status of 501(c)(3) under the IRS tax code. Other nonprofit organizations not tax-exempt under 501(c)(3) if the primary purpose is to provide certain types of qualifying public service. And then full-time AmeriCorps or Peace Corps volunteers are able to utilize their quote-unquote employer for their time of service. So as I mentioned with HR1, one of the key pieces that I did here will be changing will be what is considered a qualifying employer. Now I'm just going to share this. There is no clear explanation or understanding of, for instance, which, if any of these bullet points will be removed. But if I had to kind of speculate on it, when we think about some of these nonprofit organizations that are not necessarily perhaps in alignment with the current administration, those are the organizations that I would anticipate maybe having a little bit of issue being considered a qualifying employer. So without getting into specifics, I think many of you all understand where I'm headed with this, but this is just my general thought process based upon what was shared in terms of qualifying employer situations changing. Qualifying employment may include military service, public safety, law enforcement, public health services, public education, tribal agency or organization, or a tribal college or university, public library services, school library services, public interest law services, early childhood education, and public services for the elderly or individuals with disabilities. So as I mentioned, PSLF is not about the actual jobs or responsibilities that you have, but if you think about it, if you're working in public education, let's just say as a public school teacher or even a school social worker, that particular school district may be considered a qualifying employer because normally those are going to be government organizations, whether it be federal, state, local, or tribal. You are able to search on studentaid.gov. There is an employer search option, and I'll get into a couple of slides down the line. There is a PSLF help tool in which you are able to search through various employers to identify right off the bat if they are considered a qualifying employer. You will need that organization's employer identification number, otherwise known as their EIN, which is a tax number that is assigned to generally any nonprofit organization. My recommendation, as you all are, or hopefully most of you are looking at embarking upon the job market, if not already, over the next few months as you think about graduating, maybe take some time as you're applying to these particular organizations to see if there's information about, their eligibility on this website. So as you're getting into having your interviews with these various agencies, maybe this is a question that you can ask. Are you all considered a qualifying employer to the best of your knowledge? Have you had any students pursue PSLF that were employed with this agency? Perhaps what did this process look like for those individuals? I think that can be an added bonus if you are able to be employed by an agency that ultimately qualifies for PSLF if you have any federal loans. The organization must not be a labor union or partisan political organization. What is considered full-time employment? So full-time employment means working for a qualifying employer for a weekly average, alone or when combined, equal to at least 30 hours. And this includes during the period that's being certified. And so what happens with PSLF on a yearly basis, you have to recertify essentially your employer. So basically prove to the identified loan servicer that you continue to work for a qualifying employer equal to at least 30 hours. So during that 12-month period every year, you have to verify that you meet this criteria of full-time employment. It also includes throughout a contractual or employment period of at least 8 months in a year, such as elementary and secondary school teachers, in which case the borrower is deemed to have worked full time for the entire year. If you think about it, most teachers are not working during the summer months that school is not in session, but for purposes of full time employment, teachers in those cases would be considered full time, even for those months that they are not in school or school is in session. It is also determined by multiplying each credit or contact hour taught per week by at least 3.35 in a non-tenure track employment at an institution of higher education. So for those of you that may be considering perhaps becoming an adjunct professor at a local institution, you can also factor in your teaching hours as long as you're not on a non-tenure track, but at an institution of higher education. What is considered a qualifying payment? And so that means a payment made under a qualifying repayment plan. That means that you must pay the full amount due as shown on your monthly bill, or when you are in one of those accepted types of deferments or forbearance. Payment must be made no later than 15 days after the due date, and the payment must be made while you are employed full-time by a qualifying employer. Your payment does not need to be consecutive. So as we mentioned, making payments on a monthly basis to account for 120 total payments. But let's just say, for instance, you lose your job, you have to go on some type of, medical leave or some type of disability reason that causes you maybe to have a break in employment. Your payments do not have to be consecutive. And so they will count any qualifying payment for the period while you were working. You take your time off for whatever reason, and then if you start working, say in another 2 years, your payments will just ultimately pick back up from where you left off from when you were working. AmeriCorps or Peace Corps service volunteers can utilize their education awards to make a lump sum payment to count for up to 12 qualifying payments. What is not considered a qualifying payment? So payments made while you are enrolled in school, any grace period that you may be under, as well as a period of deferment or forbearance, except in certain circumstances. And I would encourage you, if you have questions as to whether or not your quote unquote payment would count during a deferment or forbearance, you should have this conversation with your loan servicer. And what are the qualifying repayment plans? All of the income-driven repayment plans that mentioned, and so the pay-as-you-earn, the income-based, and the income contingent repayment plans. As shared, beginning in 2028, even though, and this is information I guess I'll kind of clarify because I know we mentioned 2027 as well. Beginning in 2028, all remaining borrowers will be required to switch to the Repayment Assistance Program, otherwise known as RAP. So that will be the only income-driven repayment option. This is information passed down to us from the university's Office of Financial Aid here at the University of Michigan. And so I would imagine that if it is beginning in 2027, your loan servicer will definitely notify you of this information. I think that we can try our best as we have these sessions on a semester by semester basis to provide a bit more of an update for any student that may be interested. So even for you all that may be graduating from the program, just know that we are still available to have conversations with you all about loan forgiveness and repayment options. And so if you're interested in just keeping in touch with us over the next year or two, just to see if we have more updates on this, these specific dates and timelines, you're more than welcome to reach back out to us. How do I apply for PSLF? First and foremost, you should check to see if your employer is already in the employer database. And I provided a link again. We will provide a link to the slides on the calendar invite on the School of Social Work's webpage. But there is an employer database, which I mentioned. You can plug in the potential employer's EIN number and identify very easily if they are considered a qualifying employer. You must request that your employer's eligibility be reviewed if it is not already in the database. And so, for instance, if you are planning to be employed at an agency that is not already a part of this database, thereby considered a qualifying employer, you can make a request. Generally, I think that information is on that PSLF help tool that's linked kind of in the next bullet point. But you can request that your employer's eligibility be reviewed. I might imagine that your employer obviously might have to be on board with this. They may have to provide some additional information, but definitely you can go through that process with your employer if they are not already considered a qualifying employer. You should prepare and sign your PSLF form and request certification and signature from your employer. So as I mentioned previously, you typically should be recertifying your employment on a yearly basis. So this is a form that you will need to complete. It is electronic through the PSLF help tool. And so you will also need to require your employer, usually it's your employer's HR department that would fill out this information. And then you're able to kind of submit all of the required forms electronically. There is a paper version, just in any event, the electronic version, it is not the most appropriate for you to get these forms completed. You must be working for a qualified employer at the time you submit your PSLF forgiveness application. So remember, there are two different components. So over the 10-year period or the 120 payments, all you're needing to do is recertify your employer on a yearly basis. This helps your loan servicer keep track of the 120 payments that you're making to make sure that every single month you remain employed with a qualifying employer and that you're under one of the qualifying repayment plans. So that is what you're doing over that 10-year period. Once you've reached that 10-year period or the 120 payments, you then are submitting the actual forgiveness application to say, hey, I've made my 120 payments under a qualifying repayment plan for a qualified employer, and now I'm requesting that you all forgive the remainder of my loans. So it's essentially a two-step process, but I do strongly encourage you on a yearly basis, even if you do not change employers, to always recertify your employer, because I think that is where a lot of folks got a little bit caught up in a lot of the debacle that you probably heard over the last few years with people applying for PSLF to have their loans forgiven, only to be told that there were periods in that 10-year window where they didn't meet the qualification. So it's always helpful to recertify on a yearly basis. The other loan repayment program is administered by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Health Resources and Services Administration. It seeks behavioral and mental health clinicians, either an LMSW or an LCSW, to provide culturally competent interdisciplinary primary healthcare services to underserved populations located in selected health professional shortage areas. And in return, clinicians are assisted in their repayment of outstanding qualifying educational loans. So in a nutshell, for the National Health Services Corps Loan Repayment Program, you must be fully licensed in the state that you are practicing in. You must also be working in behavioral or mental health arenas. So again, just going to use myself as an example. I wouldn't necessarily be eligible for this particular option working in the School of Social Work here at the university in the realm of financial aid, just because I'm not providing behavioral and or mental health services to students. However, you might be able, if you think about maybe working at an institution of higher education, maybe in a counseling and psychological services department, as long as that particular employer, I guess I should say, is located in what's considered a health profession shortage area. And I'll come back to that in just a moment. As the applicant applying for loan repayment, what you are committing to is 2 or 3 years of service at this NHSC approved site. You have to sign a contract basically stating that by being offered the loan repayment fund, you are committing yourself to working at that particular agency or organization for a period of 2 to 3 years. There are specific application deadlines for the National Health Services Core Loan Repayment Program. They definitely vary year to year. So for instance, this particular year, I think the application opened in February. It closed sometime in May. They're likely reviewing applications now as students or applicants, I should say, will be notified, I believe, sometime in September is what I saw, if they are selected. You can sign up for email notification of the annual application cycle. So every year when the application becomes available, you will be notified via email. Eligibility, you must be a U.S. citizen, either U.S. born or naturalized, or a U.S. national. You must participate or be eligible to participate as a provider in the Medicare, Medicaid, and children's health insurance programs as appropriate. Again, we understand that with HR 1, some of the parameters around Medicare, Medicaid, perhaps even CHIP will be changing a little bit. And so just, keep abreast on the National Health Services Corps website to identify if there are any modifications to this particular bullet point. But essentially, what it means, you have to be licensed. As a licensed social worker, you are eligible to bill Medicare, Medicaid, and CHIP programs for your services. You must have a current, full, and unrestricted health profession license. So again, either an LCSW or LMSW in the state in which you are applying to serve. You must have unpaid student loans borrowed prior to your application for the Health Services Core Repayment Program. And you must be working at or have an accepted offer of employment with an NHSC approved service site. So again, there are areas across the country that are considered health profession shortage areas. And this website will direct you to where those areas are. I don't know particularly where they are located. Let's just say, for instance, here in Michigan. But they think about, for instance, sometimes more urban areas, sometimes very rural communities. And so as you're looking for employment, if you're interested particularly in this loan repayment program, searching through open positions in those health profession shortage areas might be a good option for you. But again, you can utilize this health workforce connector to easily search not only the areas in which you might be interested in moving to, but also the individual organizations and job openings that meet the criteria for this particular loan repayment program. For the National Health Services Core Loan Repayment Program, there are a few different options, but on the screen here, I've provided at least four of them that may be applicable for you all as social workers. So it's the traditional National Health Services Core Loan Repayment Program. There is a National Health Services Core Substance Use Disorder workforce. So for those licensed social workers who are working particularly in the substance abuse arena. There is a National Health Services Core Rural Community Repayment Program, so specifically for those that are working in rural identified areas within health profession shortage areas. And then there is a substance use disorder treatment and recovery loan repayment program. Generally, from what I saw, these are usually going to be more of your inpatient type facilities that are substance abuse related. But as you can see here, you can identify the various service commitments. So for instance, with the traditional NHSC loan repayment program, you're committing for up to 2 years of employment at that particular agency versus, say, the rural community, you would be committing to 3 years of employment with that agency. You can also see the varying award amount. So if you are approved for the traditional NHSC, you can see here that it's generally going to be 50,000 for full-time employment. When you look at the 75K, there's a note that you may not be able to see on the screen here, but these are generally going to be for more medical related professionals that are approved for up to 75,000. Typically, what we've seen for licensed social workers, it's up to $50,000 that you would be eligible for. And again, this slide just provides you with some of the eligible sites. So as you think about some of the particular settings that some of these particular loan repayment plans are applicable for. And so when we think about primary care clinics, sometimes private practices, rural health clinics, school-based clinics, so on and so forth. So you can take a look and see with each of these different repayment plan programs, the different eligible sites that you can then go and search on that health workforce connector. And I just wanted to provide a screenshot of a little bit of what the Health Workforce Connector looks like. And so you can search by discipline. So as a licensed or certified master's level social worker, or you're able to search by program. So whether it's the National Health Services Core or perhaps one of those substance use disorder programs, you can search in a variety of different arenas. Additional years of service can be provided for additional loan repayment at the discretion of NHC. So for the most part, students may be eligible to extend their quote unquote service or employment if you are approved for the National Health Services Core Loan Repayment Program. So again, for instance, if you have committed to working for 2 years and you receive $50,000, but let's just say once that $50,000 is received, you still have some loans that you have to pay back. At the end of that 2-year commitment, you might be eligible to apply for what's essentially called a continuation or an extension to say, hey, I'd like to work an additional year at this agency for, maybe another $10,000 towards my loan repayment. The amounts definitely can vary, and again, will be at the discretion of the National Health Services Corps. For the 2024 application, and I do believe that this is still the case currently, those with Spanish language proficiency were provided a one-time enhancement award of $5,000. So again, if you are able to speak Spanish, it's like a sign-on bonus, if you will, for having that language proficiency. The National Health Services Corps does give first priority funding to current or former NHSC participants with remaining eligible loans who are seeking to extend their service obligation, and clinicians likely to remain practicing in a health profession shortage area. Don't ask, because I don't know how they determine this. Perhaps it's something in the application, where you're answering a few questions about your overall commitment to working in these particular areas. And then there is also priority for applicants with a disadvantaged background. And so again, I don't have the full criteria of what that actually means, but I'm pretty sure that there are questions in the application that allow for their team who are reviewing these applications to determine if an applicant did in fact come from a disadvantaged background. There is also a health resources and services state loan repayment program. So without getting too far into the weeds, so you have the National Health Services Core loan repayment program. But then what happens is that particular program, from time to time, has provided money to individual states to offer their own loan repayment program. So kind of the notation on the website, it provides grants to more than 46 states, Washington, D.C., and 3 territories to operate their own loan repayment program for primary care providers, which will include mental health professionals and substance abuse counselors working in health profession shortage areas. So again, a lot of the eligibility is the same. It is just administered now by the individual state as opposed to the National Health Services Corps. You can identify perhaps if your state participates in this program and if they currently have funding by the link that's listed here on the screen. This link also provides contact information for either an office or a particular individual in each state. I apologize in advance if this information is not up to date, as I can only provide the link. But I think that it will at least give you a starting point of where to start in the particular state that you're interested in actually working in. And just a few helpful tips overall, making sure that you're updating your servicer, your loan servicer, on all changes, updates to mailing addresses, emails, and phone numbers. Make sure to investigate any potential student loan interest deduction on your tax returns. Again, I'm not sure if this is something that will be changing with the recent legislation, but definitely have conversations with your tax professional if you are repaying any of your student loans. Take advantage of any auto debit options to perhaps reduce your interest rates. Keep all of your records, so that includes tax returns, W-2s, job offer letters, particularly for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program and any of the applicable income-based repayment plans. If you are applying for consolidation or alternative repayment, continue making scheduled payments until you receive notification otherwise. So I think Marissa touched upon this in her slides. Never discontinue making payments while you are waiting to hear back about consolidation, while you are waiting to hear about a switch between the various repayment plans. Always continue making scheduled payments until you receive notification that you are able to stop or that you've officially been switched into a different plan with a different payment amount. Making sure that you adjust your spending and your budget before applying for any income-based repayment plans. So again, just being aware that it's based upon your income, but the federal government, they have a formula that they utilize. So it's not just because you're making, say, $50,000 that is what your payments are going to be based upon. They have a calculation and a formula that they use to determine how much your monthly payments will be. And so just make sure that you're creating some type of budget for yourself, because student loans generally, for the most part, will need to be prioritized. I have heard that it can be very difficult to get student loans wiped away. Like, let's just say, for instance, down the line that you have to pursue bankruptcy or anything of that sort. It is very, very difficult for student loans to just be, kind of wiped away or forgiven through those types of legal processes. Also, never be afraid to ask questions. And so, whether that's of our office, if we can be of any assistance, but also to your individual loan servicer. So, if that means sending emails, if that means, calling on a monthly basis until you get clarity. I remember during my time of going through the public service loan forgiveness program, there were some issues with how many qualifying payments I actually had. And I actually was able to request for something to be mailed to me. And they mailed to me this very thick packet of all of the payments that they had on record for me so that I could physically see them, in front of my face. I don't remember at the time if I had access to them electronically through studentaid.gov or my particular loan servicer's website, but they were actually able to send me a packet of information with all of the documentation that they saw in their system. So sometimes you might have to push for some of these things, but I think that the point is they want to be able, to the best of their ability, to answer your questions. I just believe that with some of these changes coming down the pipeline, just understand that I think everyone might be on a bit of a learning curve. And so as you're reaching out to ask questions, information may not be known at the time that you contact them. But again, just be persistent in your questions and making sure that you're getting the answers that you need. The slides here will also provide links to, again, some of the information that we shared today, such as studentaid.gov, the National Health Services Core Loan Repayment Program, as well as health profession shortage areas. I've also included my contact information as well as Marissa's. We usually are the two individuals in our office that will work with you all around any questions regarding loan repayment and forgiveness. I also encourage you to utilize our Career Services Office. Again, as alumni of the program, the Career Services Office is definitely still available to you. And I would imagine that their office can be very helpful as it relates to just the job search process and maybe how to navigate through asking some of these questions of potential employers as it relates to their eligibility for some of these different loan repayment programs. So never hesitate to reach out to the School of Social Work should you have any additional questions. So that concludes our webinar for today.